There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from peace. It comes from uncertainty. The kind of silence that follows when a crowd witnesses something it cannot explain. That silence fell the night Charlie Kirk collapsed on stage during his American comeback tour, a moment that would soon fracture into questions, doubts, and endless theories. In a world where every second is recorded, analyzed, and replayed, this one moment managed to leave the entire nation asking the same question: what really happened that night? Before we go deeper into the story, make sure to subscribe, because the closer we look, the more we realize this isn't just about one man's death, but about the world that watched it unfold. It was supposed to be a night of energy, optimism, and politics in motion. A sold-out venue, flags swaying, cameras positioned on every angle, and Charlie Kirk, confident as ever, walking onto the stage to deliver another impassioned speech to his supporters. For years, he had become a polarizing figure, admired by some for his commitment to conservative ideals and criticized by others for his rhetoric. Yet, regardless of opinion, his events always drew attention. That night was no different, until something happened that no one could fully describe. Witnesses recalled a flash, a sudden sound, and then silence. For a few seconds, time seemed to stop. And in those seconds, millions of people across the country would later replay that silence again and again, trying to find meaning in the noise that followed. When the footage surfaced online, confusion turned to disbelief. Videos from audience members began circulating within minutes. But instead of providing answers, they created more questions. One clip showed a bright flash from the left side of the stage. Another, taken from the opposite end, seemed to show nothing at all. Security appeared to react before the sound was heard in some recordings. And the most critical camera feed, the official stage recording, was missing entirely. Officials claimed the incident was under investigation, but their statement did little to calm the growing uncertainty. People began comparing angles, analyzing timestamps, and sharing slowed-down clips. What they found, or thought they found, didn't add up. Soon, reports emerged that several SD cards containing the raw footage from the event had disappeared. Authorities suggested it could have been accidental, the result of chaos in the aftermath. Yet to many observers it felt too precise, too convenient. The remaining footage released to the public appeared edited, tiny gaps in time, jump cuts that erased seconds. Seconds that could have shown something crucial. Those small fragments became the center of online debates, with some arguing that they were simply technical errors and others insisting they indicated tampering. Regardless of which side people chose to believe, one truth became undeniable. No one seemed to have the full picture. When officials addressed the nation days later, their explanation was cautious and incomplete. They described it as a tragic medical emergency, yet eyewitnesses disputed the details. Some attendees said they saw a brief flash. Others claimed it felt like a malfunctioning stage effect. A few mentioned being told not to discuss the event publicly. The inconsistencies fueled frustration, not because people wanted to believe in something dark, but because the official story felt unfinished. In an era defined by instant information, silence from those in charge only invites speculation. And speculation, as history shows, spreads faster than facts. Within hours, social media transformed into a digital battleground. Hashtags related to the incident trended across platforms. Amateur analysts began dissecting every frame of the available footage. Some drew lines, circles, and arrows around shadows and reflections, claiming to see evidence of something hidden. Others accused them of spreading misinformation. Each new claim contradicted the last, but together they built an unstoppable storm of digital noise. Suddenly, the search for truth had become a competition for attention. Amid that chaos, a mysterious online figure emerged, known only as the Analyst. With a distorted voice and a flickering logo, he released videos asserting that the event was not an accident. His evidence centered on a reflection in a phone screen. A faint flash, he argued, indicated remote activation of a hidden device. The claim went viral. Millions watched, debated, and shared it, despite no official verification. Whether people believed him or not, His narrative gave them something to hold onto in the fog of uncertainty. And just like that, the internet had found its new obsession. But as focus shifted toward theories and speculation, another figure unwillingly entered the spotlight. Charlie Kirk, Charlie's widow. For the first few days, she stayed silent, grieving privately while the world dissected her husband's final moments. But in the digital age, silence is rarely respected. When a clip surfaced of Erica smiling faintly at a public event, the internet erupted. That simple human expression was interpreted as proof of something deeper. Headlines speculated about her behavior. Commenters dissected her body language. Her wardrobe, her words, even her posture became the subject of endless analysis. In a matter of days, Erica went from a grieving widow to a trending topic. The critics accused her of moving on too quickly. Supporters defended her right to cope in her own way. The tragedy of losing her husband was overshadowed by an online jury that demanded a performance of grief. Every tear, or lack of it, became evidence in a story she never agreed to tell. It was a brutal reminder of how easily the internet can turn empathy into entertainment, reducing a person's pain into a spectacle for public consumption. As the debate over Erica intensified, something else quietly shifted in the background. Television coverage that once focused on the event began to change tone. Breaking news headlines about the investigation gave way to sponsored segments on technology, defense innovation, and artificial intelligence. Within days, the story of Charlie Kirk's death was being linked to discussions about AI-driven security systems and national safety investments. The transition was so smooth, it almost went unnoticed. In hindsight, the pivot revealed something deeper about the modern media landscape. When emotions run high, attention becomes currency. Every tragedy creates a surge in engagement, views, clicks, reactions, and that engagement is profitable. Corporations and political organizations quickly learn how to redirect that energy into their own narratives. Discussions about truth and accountability were replaced by conversations about digital defense funding and technological progress. The tragedy became a marketing opportunity dressed as public awareness. As days turned into weeks, the original investigation faded quietly into the background. What began as a national obsession, headlines, hashtags, and endless debate, slowly dissolved into the background noise of the next news cycle. The initial urgency, the public anger, the desperate call for answers, all of it softened with time. The missing footage that could have provided clarity was never fully recovered, and officials released no clear statement about what had truly occurred that night. For a brief moment, the country had united in confusion and grief. But as attention scattered, the silence grew louder. In that silence, speculation found space to bloom. What had happened to the footage? Who was responsible for the security breakdown? Why were certain reports delayed or redacted? Each unanswered question became an open invitation for interpretation, and every interpretation gave birth to another story. Before long, the narrative surrounding Charlie Kirk's death was no longer a single thread. It had unraveled into a web of competing truths. Some called it an accident. Others hinted at something more. A few insisted the truth had been deliberately buried. But gradually, something subtle began to shift. The story was no longer about what happened. It became about what people believed had happened. In the absence of answers, the story began to take on a life of its own. It was reshaped, reinterpreted, and reused by politicians, commentators, activists, and influencers, each finding a way to fit it into their own narrative. For some, Charlie Kirk's case became a cautionary tale about security failures, a warning that even public figures, surrounded by cameras and crowds, were not safe. They pointed to the missing footage as proof of institutional weakness, arguing that the system designed to protect people like him had failed in its most basic duty. For others, it became a rallying cry against misinformation, a reminder of how easily a single event can spiral into confusion when facts are scarce and rumors spread faster than evidence. They highlighted how quickly the online conversation fractured into factions, each convinced they alone possessed the truth. And then there were those who saw in it something deeper, a reflection of a society that no longer waits for facts before forming opinions. The tragedy became a kind of mirror, held up to a world where outrage often outweighs understanding. But in all of this noise, the man at the center of the story, Charlie Kirk himself, slowly disappeared. It's a strange thing that happens in our digital age. When a story becomes big enough, the person at its heart often becomes small. Charlie Kirk, the speaker, the husband, the friend, was gradually replaced by the idea of Charlie Kirk, the symbol. His humanity dissolved beneath the layers of commentary and speculation. People debated his choices, his beliefs, his last moments, but few spoke of his laughter, his family, or his life before that night. It was as if the man had been erased, leaving only a public projection for others to argue over. And this, perhaps, is the quietest kind of tragedy, when a person's death stops being personal and becomes performative. When the loss of a real human being becomes just another moment on social media, a topic to dissect, not a life to mourn. This is what happens when outrage becomes a commodity. Every opinion turns into content. Every emotional reaction becomes a metric, measured, analyzed, and monetized. The algorithms feed on emotion, not accuracy. News outlets know it. Influencers know it. Even the audience knows it. But the cycle keeps spinning because outrage sells. When the story of Charlie Kirk broke, it dominated timelines. Every clip, every headline, every exclusive update pulled in millions of views. The more shocking the angle, the higher the engagement. The more divisive the claim, the wider the reach. Before long, it was hard to tell who was reporting and who was performing. The pursuit of truth had been replaced by the pursuit of traction. What began as an effort to uncover what really happened became a contest to see who could say it first and loudest. The human cost, as always, was invisible. Somewhere in the middle of that noise were real people, his family, his friends, his colleagues, grieving in the shadows while the world argued in public. They watched their loved one's memory get turned into digital currency. Every headline felt like another intrusion. Every viral theory another wound. In the end, Charlie Kirk's story became less about how he died and more about what his death revealed about us. It exposed a society that moves faster than truth can catch up. We live in an age where silence is intolerable. Every gap in information is quickly filled with speculation. Every unanswered question becomes a platform for opinion. And when the truth finally arrives, if it ever does, it finds the audience has already moved on. Facts today must compete with fiction for attention, and fiction often wins because it's easier to feel than to verify. The internet rewards what provokes emotion, not what provides clarity. That's how stories like this evolve, not through lies, but through amplification of half-truths that feel more exciting than the truth itself. Public grief becomes public spectacle. What once would have been a moment of collective mourning turns into a battlefield of interpretations. Everyone feels entitled to weigh in, to comment, to speculate. Mourning is no longer private, it's interactive. And perhaps the most haunting part is that it feels normal. The blending of news, entertainment, and commerce has become so seamless that few people even question it anymore. We scroll through grief the same way we scroll through humor or music. We pause for a second, type a reaction, maybe share a clip, and then move on to the next headline. This constant consumption has dulled our sense of proportion. What should shock us no longer does. What should sadden us instead entertains us. Charlie Kirk's death became one more entry in the endless feed of content, a momentary topic, soon replaced by the next viral event. The tragedy wasn't just that a man died, it was that his story became a product. The platforms benefited. The commentators benefited. Even those who claimed to honor his memory benefited through views, followers, and revenue. But the people who truly needed closure, the ones living with the absence, were left behind. Somewhere behind the edits, the rumors, and the hashtags lies a family that lost someone. A man who walked onto a stage and never walked off again. They wanted answers. They wanted the world to care about the truth. But instead of clarity, they got commentary. Instead of answers, they got algorithms. The truth, it seems, has become another casualty of attention. Once upon a time, journalism meant patience. Investigators took time to confirm facts, to verify evidence, to protect the dignity of those involved. But the modern information economy rewards speed, not accuracy. The first version of a story is often the one that sticks, even when it's wrong. And because correction doesn't trend, the errors remain, etched into public memory. Charlie Kirk's story illustrates this perfectly. The rush to explain, to assign blame, to build a narrative came at the cost of nuance. People forgot that sometimes the most honest answer is, "We don't know yet." But patience doesn't sell. We call it the age of connection, but what it really offers is proximity without empathy. We can see tragedy unfold in real time, yet feel detached from its human weight. We share posts that say RIP, we comment our shock, and then we return to our routines. The moment passes, but for those who lost someone, it never does. Charlie Kirk's story became one more reminder that behind every trending topic is a real life, someone's son, friend, or colleague. But in the world we've built, those identities get flattened into symbols. They stop being people and start being content. And the platforms, those vast, unseen networks of algorithms, quietly decide what stories matter, how long they matter, and to whom they are shown. It's not malice, it's mathematics. Attention equals revenue. Engagement equals success. And emotion, no matter how painful, is profitable. Until the silence breaks, until someone chooses facts over speculation, the story of Charlie Kirk will remain unfinished. Because this isn't just a mystery about missing footage or unanswered questions. It's a mirror held up to the rest of us. It's about what we've allowed our culture to become. A place where emotion is currency, where truth is optional, and where tragedy is another form of entertainment. We have created a digital world that thrives on immediacy. But the truth often requires time, and time is the one thing the internet refuses to give. That's why stories like Charlie Kirk's drift into limbo. They don't end, they simply fade, buried under newer, louder moments. The result is a kind of collective amnesia. We remember the outrage, but forget the outcome. We quote the headlines, but not the facts. We share the emotion, but skip the empathy. And in doing so, we become participants in the very system we claim to criticize. Maybe that's the real tragedy. Not just the loss of a man whose story deserved better, but the loss of what his story represents. Our collective ability to pause, to think, to care beyond the algorithm. Because somewhere behind the noise, a family still waits for truth. Somewhere, there are still unanswered questions. Somewhere, there is still grief that hasn't been acknowledged properly. But the world has moved on, scrolling past, clicking next, looking for something newer, louder, easier. That's the cost of a world that measures meaning in moments, not memory. If there's one lesson to take from all this, it's that truth shouldn't have to compete for attention. Real stories, human stories, deserve space to breathe, to unfold, to be told with honesty and depth. Charlie Kirk's story is not just about one night gone wrong. It's a reflection of an era where information moves faster than understanding, and empathy is often the first thing lost in the race. But it doesn't have to stay that way. We can choose to slow down. We can choose to care. We can choose to seek truth, even when it's less convenient than outrage. Because truth might not trend, but it endures. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told with honesty and depth, don't forget to subscribe for more. Together, we can rebuild a culture that values truth over traction, clarity over chaos, and humanity over headlines.